The morning sun rose slowly over Samarkand, painting the tiled domes of the Registan in shades of gold and sapphire. Merchants had already opened their stalls, filling the square with the scent of fresh spices, baked bread, and colorful fabrics that shimmered in the light. Children ran between the rows of traders, laughing as they carried baskets for their families. The market was alive, and yet, among the joyful noise, there was one shadow. His name was Jahangir. To the villagers he appeared charming, a young man with quick hands and quicker words. But those who had suffered at his tricks knew him as a deceiver. He had made it his habit to cheat the poor and prey on the weak, disguising his schemes with a friendly smile. That morning, Jahangir leaned against a stall of fragrant dried apricots, watching the people with sharp eyes. His gaze fell on an old woman walking slowly through the crowd. She carried a basket lined with cloth, filled with round golden loaves of traditional naan bread. Her name was Oiden. Her back was bent from years of labor, yet her spirit was not broken. She placed her stall near the entrance of the market and began arranging the loaves with great care, whispering a prayer as she did so. Jahangir saw her as an easy target. He smirked, brushing the dust from his robe, and approached with a calculated gentleness in his step. He greeted her warmly, speaking with honeyed words, and offered to help sell her bread. Oiden smiled faintly, unaware of his true intentions, and thanked him for his kindness. The day seemed ordinary, yet the stage was set for something far greater than anyone in the market could imagine. As the crowd thickened and the call of merchants echoed across the square, Jahangir began to weave his scheme. The air was filled with the fragrance of hot bread, roasted lamb, and pomegranate juice, but beneath the beauty of Samarkand's market, deception was about to unfold. The market grew busier as the sun climbed higher, the shouts of traders mingling with the distant sound of horse hooves on cobblestones. Jahangir stood close to Oiden's stall, his eyes scanning the flow of customers like a hawk searching for prey. He spoke with charm, praising the bread, exaggerating its quality, drawing people closer. His words were smooth, and his manner seemed trustworthy. Oiden, grateful for the unexpected help, allowed him to handle the coins and measure the bread. She believed she had found a kind stranger, someone who respected the labor of her wrinkled hands. Yet as customers came and went, Jahangir slipped coins into his sleeve, one after another, hiding his theft behind a false smile. The old woman noticed nothing. She was busy answering questions, cutting pieces of bread for children, and blessing the buyers who left her stall. Jahangir worked with quiet precision, his greed growing as the pile of hidden coins in his sleeve grew heavier. But fate has a way of watching those who think themselves unseen. From across the square, a group of merchants whispered to one another. They had noticed Jahangir's tricks before. One of them, a carpet seller named Rustam, narrowed his eyes and folded his arms. He had warned others about this young man, yet no one had dared confront him. Now he watched closely, determined to see how far Jahangir would go. The heat of the day pressed down upon the market, yet Jahangir felt only the thrill of his deception. To him, the coins clinking softly against his arm were sweeter than any melody. He believed he was clever enough to escape as always, clever enough to fool an old woman and vanish before anyone could stop him. Still, there was something he had not noticed. As he pocketed another handful of coins, Oiden's eyes lingered on him for a moment longer than before. Her lips pressed together, and though she said nothing, a shadow of doubt crossed her expression. And in that instant, the first seed of suspicion was planted. The square of Samarkand seemed as lively as ever, yet a quiet tension stirred beneath the rhythm of trade. Rustam the carpet seller kept his gaze fixed on Jahangir, watching how his fingers moved too swiftly, how his sleeve bulged unnaturally with hidden weight. He whispered to two other merchants nearby, urging them to remain silent and keep their eyes open. Jahangir, proud and careless, did not notice the merchants' interest. He believed all eyes were too busy with silk, fruit, and spices. He leaned closer to Oiden, speaking in a low tone, convincing her to let him bargain with a wealthy traveler who had stopped to buy bread. With elaborate gestures, Jahangir took more coins than were due, passing only a fraction to Oiden. The traveler frowned but walked away without complaint, lost in the crowd. Oiden, however, felt a tightening in her chest. The doubt she had carried earlier now grew stronger. Still, she said nothing, choosing to watch and wait. From the far side of the market, another man had entered the square. His stride was confident, his robe marked with a fine embroidery of status. People moved aside as he walked, for he was known as Beksad, a respected official and protector of the merchants. He was also Oiden's son, though most did not know their relation. Beksad paused by Rustam's stall, listening to the hushed complaints of the traders. He followed their gaze towards Oiden's stall, where Jahangir stood smiling too brightly. A flicker of anger lit Beksad's eyes, though he remained still, his hands folded behind his back. The air grew heavy, as though the square itself waited for the truth to surface. That afternoon, the heat had softened, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of coriander and saffron. Jahangir continued his games, believing the day belonged to him. Oiden's stall had drawn a steady stream of customers, and the old woman's loaves were nearly gone. Yet her eyes now studied Jahangir carefully. She noticed how his smile never reached his eyes, how his sleeves sagged unnaturally, and how the coins she counted did not match the bread she had sold. At last, Oiden spoke softly. "My son, you are quick with numbers, perhaps too quick. Tell me, where are the missing coins?" Jahangir laughed easily, waving away her concern, claiming that she had miscounted in her old age. He offered her a loaf as though to distract her, his voice smooth as silk. But Oiden's doubt did not fade. She nodded quietly, choosing not to argue, but her silence carried weight. From the shadows of the nearby archway, Beksad observed everything. His mother's patience, Jahangir's deception, and the murmurs spreading among the merchants. His jaw tightened as he stepped back into the crowd, waiting for the right moment. The market, once filled only with cheer, now hummed with unease. Word of Jahangir's thefts began to ripple from one trader to another. Customers slowed their steps, eyes narrowing, suspicion growing like a storm on the horizon. And still, Jahangir smiled, blind to the walls closing in around him. As the last of the bread loaves were sold, Oiden began packing her empty basket. Jahangir clapped his hands together, declaring with false pride that it had been a profitable day. He offered to escort her home, his sleeve heavy with stolen coins, his mind already planning his escape. But Oiden hesitated. Her heart told her something was wrong, and her silence lingered too long. Jahangir noticed and frowned, for the first time sensing that suspicion might have taken root. Before he could speak further, Rustam the carpet seller approached. His voice was calm, yet his words cut sharp. "Oiden, have you counted your earnings? For I fear this young man has earned more for himself than for you." The crowd around them fell quiet. Oiden's wrinkled hands trembled as she looked from Rustam to Jahangir. The young man forced a laugh, insisting it was a misunderstanding, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. Other merchants stepped closer, surrounding the stall without a word. The trap had begun to close. And in the distance, Beksad started walking towards them, his expression unreadable, his step steady as the beat of a drum. Jahangir's charm faltered as whispers grew louder. The people of the market began to speak of coins gone missing, of lies told, of customers cheated in weeks past. Stories that had once been only suspicions now gathered into a storm. He raised his voice, swearing his innocence, demanding that the merchant show proof. His eyes darted left and right, searching for a gap through which he might slip away. But every path was blocked by watchful eyes and folded arms. Oiden looked at him, her face calm though her heart ached. "You came to me with sweet words," she said, "but truth reveals itself, even if hidden beneath silk." Jahangir scowled, anger flashing in his eyes. The mask of kindness shattered, replaced by the raw face of greed and fear. He clutched his sleeve protectively, as if to guard the treasure within, but the gesture only betrayed him further. And then, a deep voice broke the tension. "Enough." Beksad had arrived. The crowd parted before him, silent, their gazes shifting between the official and the thief. Jahangir's mouth went dry as he recognized the man who now stood before him. Beksad's eyes did not leave Jahangir, yet when he spoke, his words were first for his mother. "Oydin, is this man your helper or your deceiver?" The old woman's voice was steady, though her hands still trembled. "He promised to help, yet I fear he has stolen from me and from the trust of the market." The crowd murmured, their doubts now confirmed. Jahangir tried to interrupt, insisting on his innocence, but Beksad raised his hand, and silence returned. Slowly, Beksad stepped closer, his presence heavy with authority. "You stand accused not only of theft, but of dishonoring this market, where trade is built on trust. Every coin you hide speaks against you." Jahangir's lips quivered as he searched for words, but none came. His charm had abandoned him. The weight of the coins, once his pride, now felt like chains around his wrist. And when Beksad turned to the crowd and declared that truth would be revealed in full view of all, Jahangir knew escape was no longer possible. A circle formed around the stall, the heart of the Registan now transformed into a place of judgment. Merchants and travelers, children and elders, all gathered to witness the trial. Beksad ordered Jahangir to empty his sleeve. The young man hesitated, his face pale. With trembling hands, he loosened the fabric, and one by one, the stolen coins spilled onto the ground. The metallic sound rang through the square like a bell of truth. Gasps rose from the crowd. Mothers clutched their children, merchants shook their heads, and Oydin closed her eyes, whispering a prayer of sorrow. Jahangir fell to his knees, his words tumbling out in desperation. He begged for mercy, claiming hunger, misfortune, and the cruelty of fate. But the faces around him showed no pity, only anger and disappointment. Beksad's voice cut through his pleas. "You have deceived not only my mother, but this entire market. Justice will be given in the same place where you committed your crime." The crowd leaned forward, breath held, waiting for the judgment to fall. Beksad commanded that the stolen coins be gathered and returned to Oydin and the rightful buyers who had been cheated. Each piece of silver was placed in her trembling hands, while Jahangir watched in shame, unable to lift his head. The merchants demanded punishment, their voices rising like a storm. Some called for exile, others for labor to repay his crimes. Beksad raised his hand once more, and silence fell. "He will not be cast out," Beksad declared, "for exile would free him from the eyes of those he has wronged. Instead, he will remain here, under the weight of his shame, known by all as a warning." Gasps and murmurs spread through the crowd. To live among those he had deceived, to be recognized daily as a thief, was a punishment heavier than chains. Jahangir's shoulders sank, his pride shattered, his name forever stained. And in that moment, the people of the market understood that justice had been served, not through cruelty, but through truth. The sun dipped low over Samarkand, its golden light casting long shadows across the square. The merchants returned to their stalls, yet their eyes lingered on Jahangir, who sat alone, broken, beneath the archway. Oydin placed her basket upon her arm and turned to her son. Her voice was soft but resolute. "You have honored not only me, but the spirit of this market. Justice shines brighter than gold." Beksad bowed his head to her, yet his gaze remained firm upon Jahangir. The young man's tricks had ended, his charm gone, replaced by the silence of disgrace. Children pointed as they passed, merchants whispered his name with contempt, and every face reminded him of what he had lost. The market continued as it always had, filled with life, color, and sound. Yet beneath its beauty lay a new memory, a story whispered from stall to stall, a reminder that deception finds no shelter beneath the watchful eyes of Samarkand. And so Jahangir lived on, surrounded not by riches, but by the heavy truth of a lesson he could never escape.